Welcome back to the Powered Up Coaches Show, sponsored by Sideline Power, your number one choice for coaching communications and all things sports tech related. The Powered Up Coaches Show goes beyond X's and O's and asks the question, how does a coach create winning seasons year after year after year? What happens when you take a guy who's never thought about coaching football and you kind of thrust him into the head coach's position? Yikes. Well, with a great mentor and a program built on a foundation of faith, family, football, and fun, in that order, you get 9 state playoff appearances in 11 years. It's amazing. This week, host Tim Washburn sits down with head coach at Yutan High School, Dan Krajicek, and they talk about that. They talk about growing up on a farm and the importance of the farm chores and how it influenced his work ethic today. And how the heck do you build a program that kids want to stay after the whistle and continue working reps just because they love it? It's actually one of my favorite episodes, so stay tuned and stay powered up.
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to have a lot of fun here because I've got a farm boy sitting right here to my right, a guy that grew up not far from Greenwood, Nebraska, where we taped the show, head coach Dan Krajicek of Yutan. And, Coach, let's start right there because you and I were just chatting. Your parents had a farm. You spent a lot of time growing up just south of Gretna, right? Mm-hmm. So tell me what a typical day was like on the Krajicek farm.
Dad worked full-time on top of farming as well. And so me and my older brother, we spent a lot of time cleaning hog pens, cleaning chicken pens, baling hay, all that fun stuff that it's almost disappointing that more kids don't get to experience that today.
Now, is that tongue-in-cheek or are you serious?
Well, some of it. I've always said I'd like to if I can find a guy still doing square bales and loading them on a rack. You can't get any better training for hang clean or anything like that, throwing bales 5-6 high on a rack.
Isn't that true? I'll tell you what, and you think back to the great Cornhusker teams and some of the great athletes that came out of Nebraska. A lot of these guys, they were throwing bales of hay in the summer, weren't they?
Absolutely. Anytime we play any of those teams out west or up north, and sometimes you just see these kids that are like, they got the farmer's tan. You can see it on their, even in the fall still. So that they're out there working, and like those guys, it kind of gives you a different level of toughness, and they can work. And I've had a few at UTAN, not as many as it's there's just not many family farms anymore. But whenever we do get a farm kid, you can tell they know how to work.
Yeah,
so that's fun.
That's the thing, there isn't a farm kid in the world that hasn't had to work. I was just talking to an adult the other day who obviously grew up on a farm. He credits his success in business with the work ethic he learned on the farm. And it sounds like, I see you nod, you would too.
Yeah, that, in fact, probably the best player I've coached, Colton Feast, was a farm kid. And I always, I tell this story sometimes. We had a conditioning week where we were doing the farmer's carrying, I think he was carrying 80-pound dumbbells the length of the football field. And he gets done, and we're sitting there talking a little bit, and he was rubbing his forearms, and I like, those dumbbells pretty heavy. He's like, it's not so much that. We put like 600, 700 bales in the barn this morning. Like, jeez, and then you just came out here and did this. So, and like, when I was trying to explain, how hard he used to work, it really made sense.
I would imagine it was a natural transition because we're going to talk about your career as well. You played a little college football, University of Nebraska at Kearney. Not an easy place, D2 football school.
Yep.
So I imagine the weight room was not real hard compared to what you guys had to do.
No, and that was one thing, when I get to go in and lift weights, it was not a break, but I sure like that more than cleaning out hog pens or stuff like that. So because air conditioning in the school at least, and it smelled a little bit better anyways.
So, and you did it all. It wasn't just farming. You had the hogs, and
we had some cattle, not a whole lot. We had chickens, hogs. We actually, my dad does raise exotic birds too. And so there was a time when I was in high school where we had 14 rheas, which is a South American ostrich. and we had those running around, and we had some interesting times with those things.
You didn't have a farm; you had a zoo.
It was more of a zoo. It was a little bit of a zoo, yeah, because we had Canadian geese, and wood ducks and mandarin ducks and golden pheasants, silver pheasants. He's got peacocks now, the albino ones and all that stuff. But it's kind of a hobby for him. But it was a lot of fun.
Do you miss that?
Yeah, they still live out there, and so we go out there quite a bit. And he doesn't farm anymore. He's retired, but he still lives on the acreage. They parcel out about 20 acres, and they still live out there. So
tell me the hardest thing that you can remember having to do on the farm growing up. What was the one thing that was the hardest thing?
Hardest, or what I hated the most, was castrating hogs.
Oh, there you go. That would stand out.
And I don't know if my dad waited till they were 150, 200 pounds on purpose or whatever it was, but it was and I wrestled in high school too, so maybe that helped out a little bit with that, because I was a pretty successful high school wrestler, and wrestling a 200-pound hog in the manure, trying to get him tackled for that is that I don't miss that. That's one thing I could do without.
Well, I got to tell you, you got some lessons in life out there on the farm, and the one thing though I'm always curious about with farm kids is that you're out there, you're working, and you start at an early age, and you work and you work. Did you get a chance? I've talked to so many coaches on this show who played in the empty lot, the tackle football games as a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, 14-year-old. Did you get a chance to go into town and do that? And if not, where did you get your interest in sports being out on the farm?
My dad played football at Kearney, and my uncle played, and they were always into athletics. And it was just kind of something we did, growing up. They would take us in for youth basketball games, stuff like that. Baseball was a little much in the summer because a lot of baseball practice. The wintertime was a little bit easier because the farming slowed down a little bit, so we had time for that. But it was really, me and my older brother played a lot of sports together.
Right.
Pretty competitive. But that's basically where that came from.
Right. So let's go into your high school football days, because you ended up playing a little D end, right, and tight end.
Yep.
And we know where you got your strength and where you bulked up was on the farm. Mm-hmm. But tell me, of the two sides of the ball, what'd you like the most?
Defense. And I say that like I had a very offensive line mentality. Yeah. Like I loved blocking as a tight end. I was undersized, but I always saw it as a challenge, like trying to block guys who were, 50, 60 pounds heavier than me. And I just loved that. Yeah. I just it didn't, going into a game and seeing some guy that was towered over me, I was like, oh, okay, how am I going to figure this out? And so that was always a lot of fun for me to try to do that. And then defensive side, I really liked it. By my senior year at the style of defense we played at defensive end, I got some games I'd get kind of bored because they'd always go the other way all the time. And so it was like, just kind of, all right, no matter what I did, they're running away from me. We'd try flipping sides and stuff like that. But I really enjoyed it. We had a lot of, I just remember having a lot of fun playing high school football.
I think the one thing that some people wonder about is on the defensive side, it sounds like you could just pin your ears back and go. And on the offensive side, you're thinking, how am I going to deal with this, right? How am I going to make this, how am I going to take on this bigger guy? Is that true, or is there a lot more strategy when you were playing ball?
Now, with the style of defense, and it's actually the same style that we play Yutan. It's more of a read and react defense. So our defensive ends and the way I played it, it's more of a, it's a 52, but we play it more like a, it's like a 3-4 with the outside guys walked up, and so it's kind of a linebacker spot, but it was up on the line. And we just, you had to make sure everything get turned in.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing, and make sure you didn't open up a hole there. So kind of both sides, it was a lot of, and I've always, when I wrestled and when I did that stuff, it was the chess match for me was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, trying to figure out how to beat somebody mentally, how to, technique them and stuff like that. Because, sometimes you're going to go against guys who are bigger and stronger than you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. And in high school, you did it all. You played football, you wrestled, and obviously you ran track.
Yep.
Now, tell me a little bit about how wrestling, particularly, I hear this all the time, how football coaches at the next level, they love to recruit wrestlers. Why is that?
Yeah. It's the same concept in football. You're using your body, your leverage, your strength to manipulate another person's body, and using leverage and just the different, of course, the toughness and the physicality. You don't get scared of, getting physical with somebody, but how to use your hips, balance, all that stuff. I really push at Yutan since I've been there. I try to get as many kids out for junior high football, even the kids I know are going to play basketball. And the basketball coach, Coach Gardner, is on board with me on this too. Because he knows anytime he's got a kid who's wrestled in junior high, he's going to get a tougher basketball player. And a kid who's not afraid to kind of get, push around and rebound and play defense, that kind of stuff. So, it's just the, when we show tackling drills, I always have my wrestlers, all right, it's a double leg takedown. They have a little bit of advantage defensively, and my best defensive players have all at least wrestled in junior high. I mean, it's every single one of them. So
when you're in high school, has the switch flipped at this point? Do you know football is it, or are you still debating between, say, wrestling, football, or even track?
I always told, people ask me that because, my senior year I was undefeated in wrestling. And so like, oh, you're going to wrestle? And it was more, I got a lot out of wrestling, but I just had a lot more fun playing football.
Right.
And football is just fun. So, and I've been around a little bit of college wrestling, and you've got to just love it. You've got to be, just in it, you had to do in football too, but it's, when I was in wrestling, I cut about 25 pounds my senior year to wrestle. And, I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. They're just, cause I probably would have had to do that at least in college too. So I was like, football was just a lot more fun, and I enjoyed it just as much. So, that was kind of where I went.
Did you know at this point, when did it, hit you that, look, I want to be a high school football coach? Had it hit you in high school? Did it hit you in college?
Nope. I never,
you were late comer to this. Huh?
I never had plans to be a coach. I kind of a series of just weird events. I was actually living in Belleville, Illinois, and I was helping out coach at a Catholic school there wrestling, and we were planning on moving back. Our kids were getting into school, and my old wrestling coach, Jason Arlt, was at Yutan, and he was the head wrestling coach at Yutan. And he needed an assistant coach. He's like, yeah, come look in the area, see. And so we came and we toured the school, and really liked everything. And so we found a place in Yutan and sent our kids to school there. And I started as a wrestling coach. And when I went in for my interview for the wrestling assistant wrestling job, they're like, oh, we have an assistant football. Did you know anything about football? I was like, well, I played right out of high school, but I haven't been around it since. So then they like, well, okay, you can be an assistant. We need an assistant. And the football team then was, there was talks of co-oping with Meade at the time, because the year before they only had 19 kids go out, and they played 11-man football.
Meade did.
No, Yutan.
Yutan.
Yutan had 19 kids out, and they finished the year with like 16 healthy. So they were like, then it was a numbers issue. And then then the first year I was there, we only had 23 kids out, and we were a little bit better. We had a couple of good kids. We had that Nate Fisher, who's now pitching now.
That's right.
He was our quarterback that year as a junior, and we had the season, we made the playoffs, got beat in the first round, and then I was like, okay, well that was fun. I'll keep doing that. And then the head coach resigned, and then I was just kind of in my head, I was like, oh, I wonder who new guy's gonna be. And after it was January, the principal Tim McNamara came and was like, hey, why don't you apply for the head football job? And I'd only been an assistant for a year, and I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. If you can't find anybody, I guess I'll do it because I really liked it, and I liked the kids and everything, and I don't know how hard they looked because
well, they wanted you.
Well, and so I like, okay, yeah, you got the job, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know. I had 1 year as an assistant. I've been out of for a long time. I'd never planned on doing this. I knew I had a lot of fun as an assistant. And so, now I'm the head coach, and I knew the first thing I had to do is try to build up the numbers and get things going. And
well, let's start with that. And by the way, I got to stop because everybody I get on this show, right? I mean, their career path is incredibly intentional, right? They are laying down tracks, and I love it. You are the accidental football coach, but look out, you've gone to state 9 out of 10 years. So let's start right there. You've got a numbers problem. You're now thrust into this role.
Yep.
What is your strategy? Because there's so many coaches out there that can relate to this, right? Their numbers are a little bit off. What was your strategy to build those numbers up?
I did a lot of in-house recruiting. That first year, we had Nate Fisher was he was going to be a senior my first year as a head coach, and I had heard that he wasn't going to go out because he was worried about baseball and hurting his back because he had some back problems, and he was our quarterback. And so I went to him and convinced him. I was like, hey, come be a wide receiver. I don't care. I just need you. You're the best athlete in the school. I need you out here. If I don't get you, I'm going to lose all these other guys. Like, I need you out here. And he was cool. He was like, I'll play receiver for you. And then I moved him from safety. He wanted to try linebacker. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good too. And then that year, this is a little bit of a side note, but he had 130 tackles. If he didn't tackle him, we didn't really have anybody who was going to tackle him. And
by the way, we should tell everyone, if they don't know Nate Fisher, he's at the AAA level right now. He's made his
pitched in the
major league.
Yep.
Tremendous athlete. You're right. But anyway, pick this up. I love it.
So we were, kind of recruiting there, and then the biggest thing I had to do, and I recognized this even when I was an assistant coach, is I had to convince these kids they could be good. Because the kids knew before the season started, that first year I was there, what games they were going to win and what games they were going to lose. And I was like, it was just foreign to me because I was always, why are we playing the games? It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
So I had to, started showing them they could be better and do. And so we really got the weight room going, and getting them in there and really buying into that because Yutan had gone from 1988 when they made the finals. They hadn't won a playoff game until it had been my third year, winning a playoff game. So it was the second longest streak in the state next to Plattsmouth. And so it had been a while since there was some success, but it had just been a long time since they had any of it. So getting the kids to believe they could be good, and getting the weight room going, and then trying to get them to take ownership in what they were doing was a big thing. Like when we do our fundraisers, we'd put the money right back into the weight room, and then buying weight equipment and stuff. And the school was like, well, we could buy this, and I just told them, no, I want the football kids to pay for it. I want them to think of it as theirs. And so they'll take ownership in it, and then you could start to see it. They started, I had some other coaches complain to me like, oh, these football guys think they own the weight room. Good. I kind of
a good complaint.
Yes. There. I was like, they're trying to sneak in there and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, we had problems at getting anybody in there. So really recruiting and just convincing them that they could be good and showing them and then, that was a big thing. So I think that my first year as head coach, we had 28, 29 kids, which is still not enough. But then after that, we were over 30, 35 most years. And a few years we've been really good. we had almost 40.
You can take that call, by the way. If you need to.
It's just a text. Yeah, we're good. We've had, because at C2, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
Like, you see teams when you play your Battle Creeks and your David City Aquinas and Norfolk Catholic we played. When we played them this last year, they had 15 seniors. And we barely had 15 between our junior and senior class because we only had 5 seniors. And that, and I know, the 1 year we had, we had like 12 seniors and 13 seniors and 11 juniors. And it was like, holy cow, we're pretty good. Like, you just can't not be that good when you got that many kids. Because there was one of the years we didn't make the playoffs after we won the state championship. I was starting 2 freshmen on the line both ways. And so that was a big deal. And really just kind of putting a system in that, and getting the kids to believe in what we were trying to do. And you could see it switch. Like, my first year, we won 3 games, but back then they took 32 teams to the playoffs, and so we were the 32nd team in. So we were playing the 1 seed, and we had lost to them earlier in the year it was Brownell Talbot when they had an undefeated season, and they had beaten us by like 40 some points the first time. Well, in the playoffs, the first round, we kind of watched the film and showed them, hey, this is what we need to do. And then going into halftime, we were only down 7-0. And then we ended up losing the game 14-0. And we had a chance to tie it in the second half, and they were right there. And so that kind of, some of the underclassmen, they were like, I remember after the season, they were like, oh, we're so close to being, it's like, yep, we're getting there. And then it just kind of started taking off from there.
So I've heard you say multiple times that I had to get them to believe that they would be good. Now, part of it is they start seeing it there. They take on the number 1 seed, 32 seed, hold them to 14. But what was a conversation like? What did it sound like from you to them to get them to understand that they could be good?
Big part of it was in the weight room, showing them even in the span of a year, because a lot of these kids had never lifted, and we got them lifting, and they started seeing those improvements there. And then just kind of showing them there were glimpses of it on film that year, and then we just highlight that and just be like, look at what you can, if you do this right, and we're not there yet, but what we can be and what we can do. And then really, we've really pushed them really hard physically, because I remember when I first got there, we had seniors yelling at freshmen for beating them in sprints. I was like, well, we can't have this. This is why we haven't won a playoff game in 20 some years, is because of this. And so we got rid of that and started making, the competition part of it. And then, and really just having, just trying to make it football practice as fun as we can, was a big thing. You can make, I think, I don't know, some coaches, I don't know if they lose that a little bit, as football's supposed to be a lot of fun, and you can go really, really hard and you can still have a lot of fun. And that's kind of what we try to do, is we keep it pretty light. And that's kind of what we try to incorporate in our practices and everything. I try to make
What does that look like when you say that?
It's really just it's a relationship thing, because that's one of the things I try to do is it's not like a college team where I can recruit my kids. I got the kids who come up through the school. Some of the Class A schools might bring in other kids, but I haven't had anybody transfer in ever that that's really made a big impact. We've all done this with our hometown kids, and so really just getting these kids pointed in the right direction. And it sounds simple, but it really was. It was like and I can remember a couple of times in practice, kids that first year kind of talking back, having some attitude, and then kind of pulling them aside afterwards and explaining to them like, hey, here's how it's supposed to work and everything, and not jumping them at the, kind of jumping them at the time, but like afterwards explaining to them and everything. And then like, so like in practice, trying to keep it fun, if I get through my script and we get through it fast, I'll let the kids call some plays, and then they'll move around and oh, can I play quarterback? And there's only a few kids where I'm like, no, you don't get to play quarterback. This is just ridiculous. And, and the kids know, like, as long as it's up tempo and the focus is there and everything, if we get through all of our stuff, like, yeah, we'll get to have fun. Cause thing I really like is when I blow the whistle at the end of practice and the kids don't want to be done. Cause I had a lot of fun playing high school football, but it was like, okay, thank God we're done. It was kind of getting to that point where, and so I try to have my practices and everything. So, and I go, whether it's football, wrestling, or track, whatever I'm coaching, I want the kids to want more. Yeah. I don't want them to be sick of it. Don't want them to burn out, because especially kids today have there's so much more stress levels on them than I remember having, that I try to, it should be a little bit of an outlet. And I'm, so really building those relationships, and we talk all the time during practice. We try to play some games here and there, but really just keeping the energy level up is a big thing. Right. That makes it a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yep. We kind of blew through your high school and your college, and I want to come back to that. But when you made the revelation here, of how you got into coaching, I was like, we got to go with this. We got to run with this, because it's a great story. But now you get the job, right? Yep. You walk in, it kind of falls on your lap in a sense. And you've got to identify, we got to get numbers up. Mm-hmm. But also, what were some other things that you identified that said, look, we've got to get numbers up, but this is also a problem with the program, or an issue, or a challenge, whatever word you want to use. Let's start focusing on that. Do you remember what one or two other things you had to deal with? Yeah.
So Warren Mumson was the coach at Yutan for 20 years and took him to 2 finals, was really good, made the playoffs tons of years. He was still working at the school at this time. I remember asking him, Coach, because his last few years, they didn't have a lot of success. And I remember, Coach, what do you regret about? He said, I changed my systems, and because I didn't think I had the athletes for them. And then the kids lost confidence in what we were doing. The constant changing of, okay, well, we're going to go to this because I don't have guys to run this. Where if I just would have stuck it out, he's like, we were bad anyways, because the kids were all learning new stuff. And if I had just stuck it out, we might not have been as good, but then my underclassmen would have been in the same thing. And then so I really wanted to bring in a system that I knew I could run with any kids, because I've had great big linemen, and I've had, I had a year, was the third year, we went 6-3, and my starting center was our 138-pound wrestler. One of our starting guards was our 145-pound wrestler, and then the other starting tackle was our 132-pound wrestler.
And I know you're playing in C2, but that's still tiny.
That's tiny. I mean, if I had that now, but we had those 3 guys, and then we had 2 freshmen, and that was our starting line, and we went 6-3. And then I've had, 2 of the freshmen were eventual all-state players as seniors, but they were still freshmen starting on the offensive line, which is a scary thing for most guys, coaches. I know that, but
so you want a system that everyone can feel.
Yeah, and so I called Kirk Elledge, who was the head coach at Gretna for 12 years. He was never my head coach, but I had taken stats for him in junior high, and I called him and I was like, Coach, I want to run some of the stuff we ran then, or that you had, because I remember him beating some Elkhorn teams when they had no business beating Elkhorn teams. And so I invited him to practice. I'm like, just kind of show us some stuff. And he showed up to practice that my first year, and didn't really know. He's like, okay, what do you want me to do? I'm like, how should we do this? And then he showed it a little bit, and he'd been retired he was the principal of Gretna. He'd been retired for a couple years. So I think he was a little bored. So he's like, oh, is that, after practice, is like, is that what you want? And I said, yep. Same time tomorrow though. So he just started coming back every day, and he really helped me. After a few years, I always thought this, like, for every new coach, boy, if they could find a Kirk Elledge, an old retired coach who had done it, and because he helped me avoid a lot of mistakes I think a lot of young coaches make. And he was real good, not stepping up, not telling me what to do, not telling anything, just kind of, okay, just think about this or anything like that. So he really mentored me as far as coaching goes, but it was just invaluable. So really that was, I tell people that was one of my biggest strengths is finding good people and recruiting them.
Coaching, and kudos to you. So often a coach might not feel comfortable, right? Saying, hey, I'm going to bring in this guy who's coached at a big school,
yep.
Gretna, and I know it wasn't probably as big as it is today.
It's B.
Yep. And you show, vulnerability by coming in and saying, hey, look, show me, teach me. I'm going to learn. I'm going to focus on other things. And you assembled an excellent staff of people around you.
Yep.
And that probably is lesson number one for a coach if they're trying to build a program, right?
Absolutely. Like that's one of the things as a head coach, my job is to try to, number one, mold these kids and try to be a good role model for them, but try to win as many games as I can. And so there was a lot of times where I would start coaching something during my first few years, and I'd just kind of stop and be like, what am I doing? And Coach Elledge had been doing it for 20 years. I'm like, Coach, come show this. And then so I would watch him, and because I'm the head coach, but geez, he's been doing this a lot longer. Coaches, and I've seen this a lot of times, the coach's biggest enemy is their ego. And if you can put that away for a little while, and because I never think, I've got a lot of stories of me like, well, that was admittedly a big mistake, but just learning from it, because that's
right.
We try to tell the kids have a short memory and everything, so we can't be afraid to make mistakes either in the coaching thing, and try to figure that out. But that was a big thing, having him. And then I've had some other assistant coaches that have got a lot more, a lot more experience than me, either around football or anything else. But just knowing, and they've all been really good about, they don't try to overstep their bounds. And most of the time they're worried about overstepping me, and I'm like, hey, if this makes us better, it's my job to put you in that position. It's not my job to do everything, especially at practice. So kind of giving them the inside of our system, giving them the freedom to do what they need to do.
Well, rule number one of any great CEO, you got to delegate so that you can build a great team around you. You've done that. Now, here's a piece of advice that a lot of people are out there, they're wanting. They hear that you've gone out, you've gotten the Coach Elledges of the world, and you've gotten some other excellent assistant coaches, and they've stuck with you, and I want to talk about that in a second too. How do you recruit a coach? How do you recruit to your staff? If anyone wants to, they need that advice from you.
Yeah. So a lot of times if I find out somebody's interested, or, maybe because it's tough, you got to have the time. So, first thing I'm trying to find is, number one, we don't have none of my teachers in the building are football coaches. So we got, they're head coaches in other sports, but there's just not very many coaches out there anymore. And I've been on our administration, I'm like, hire me some young coaches, that want to do this. But anyways, it's hard to find, and coaching's hard. And so if I find out somebody in town or somebody who's got a connection somewhere, might be able to help, I'll invite them to practice and just try to get them to see how much fun it can be. And see it, and there's not a lot, there's not very many things that you can do that is as rewarding as coaching. And so sometimes when you're doing these other jobs, or maybe not around kids or anything like that, and getting a chance to be around kids and positively influence them, there's nothing like it. So just kind of getting a sample, and number one, I try to make sure all the guys that I've been able to hire are good men, good guys.
Yeah.
And then if they have the time, and then if I can get those two things together, I usually am pretty good about getting them. It's kind of I don't want to say manipulate, but it just, here's a little taste of what this is like.
Sure.
And then that pulls them in.
Well, one thing, just sitting back and listening, is that it sounds like you're going to give them responsibility, which I think every assistant coach wants, right? Mm-hmm. Coach that trusts them, a head coach that trusts them and gives them responsibility. Now, with that said, in the notes that you and I shared before the show today, you've also got great tenure amongst your staff.
Yeah, Coach Dolzel, my line coach, which is, the most important assistant coach, he's been with me every year. In fact, after I got the head job, we didn't have anybody, I was the only coach. And so I needed to find assistants. And I had actually played football. Coach Dolzel and I grew up about a mile apart he lived on an acreage. They didn't farm, but we were about, 9 miles south of Gretna. So when we'd go to the weight room, we'd carpool or whatever. And so we've been really good friends since the 6th grade. And he was an offensive lineman, defensive lineman in high school. He didn't play in college, but when I was like, I need a line coach, and he was working for my dad at the time and at the med center, and I was like, well, see if your boss will let you off work to come help me out. And luckily it all worked out. And so I told him that he's not allowed to quit. He just had twins this last 2 months ago. So his wife he was coaching a lot more. He's coaching junior high basketball, and he was doing junior high wrestling. He was doing a bunch of other stuff. So his wife told him, you better just, we got 2 babies around.
Yeah.
You can do football still. But I was like, okay, good.
Well, Coach, your power to keep these guys on is going to be tested here, right?
Yeah.
But the value of having a bunch of assistants who have been with you, who know the system, who stay with you. Talk about how that has helped you as well as a head coach.
Yeah, Coach Elledge helped me get started, and he was there. He was there for the first 5 years, which was really, he wasn't planning on even doing it at all. He's kind of like me. He wasn't planning on doing it and just kind of got roped into it. But then, most of the time when I've had assistant coaches leave, and part of it's because we don't have any coaches in that are teachers, but, they get their work responsibility and they just can't make the time commitment. And so they're really, I just lost, 2 years ago, Cody Carden was one of my coaches. And he was great, and he's helped out a little bit last year, but just work, and it's a hard schedule to try to make up. And then Coach Higgins, he helps out, and he can't even make it all the time because his work schedule doesn't work, but he has enough fun, and he's a pretty good help to the staff. He played at UNO, and then he played for the Saints, and so he brings a little gravitas to the. And
I understand, caught a pass from Drew Brees, right?
Yeah, he likes to downplay it. If you knew him, he's a real humble guy. But you're the only guy who's caught a pass from a Hall of Famer here. You tell us what to do here, kind of a thing. So, but no, he's really good, and he helps out with our FCA and everything, and he's just a real stand-up guy. And then. Nate Mum has been with me for a few years.
Yeah, good guy.
Yep, he's. But yeah, and then I've got after Cody left, he had another buddy that he was a Marine with. Really like having Marines on the staff. That's
That'll bring an edge.
Yeah, John Erickson filled in for him, and he's been with me the last couple of years, and he's helping out in the weight room, and he's a certified strength coach and everything, so he helps out with that stuff. And but yeah, it's kind of nice trading one Marine for another.
So you kind of, again, you get thrust into this role in a sense, right? And you've got to get numbers up. We talked about, but then there's also the all important culture that every program, winning program, when you go to state 9 out of 10 years as a head coach, you've got something that is working. How do you decide what you want that culture to be? Because this comes up on you quick.
Yeah.
So how do you decide what you want it to be, and then how do you implement it?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. Like my brother was a track coach at South Sioux City, and he gave me a good advice when I first started coaching. He's like, write down everything you think you know about coaching and all that. Like it, just put it in a document on the computer and come back to it, read it, add to it. So I did that, and when the first time I wrote it, I think it was like half a page. And now 10 years later, it's like 15 pages. Because every time I like stealing stuff from other people, like hey, this looks really good, I'm going to steal this, bring it into my stuff. But how you get where we kind of demand excellence, like, I tell the kids at the beginning of the year, every year, we're not, I don't give them a choice. Like, it's like, we're not getting detentions in school. Like, what if we do? We're not. There's no what if we do. You're going to behave in school. You're going to get all your work done. You're going to do all this. And then, when it comes to the weight room, when it comes to doing the extra stuff, this is what we do here. This is just what we're going to do. And don't punish them if they don't, if they get a detention, they might have a little bit of something to remind them. But really, I have teachers like, well, wish football season could be all year because the kids are so well behaved during football season. And I haven't had to, it's been years since I've had to punish anybody because it's just kind of and I never really, there was a couple of kids early on that I had to get creative with to remind them not to get in trouble. But then after those kids, it just kind of, it's just the way it is. And, being fair with the kids, always being honest, that goes a long ways. One of the things it really helps, I film practices. I was telling the guy downstairs, we bought a drone from you guys like 5 years, mine more than that, 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. And we film practices. And then, anytime kids are having, why am I playing? Why am I starting? Why can't I do this? Well, just come in, let's watch some practice film. And you can be really honest with them and show them like, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's what you're doing. Here's what you need to do. And I've been really lucky in that I've had some really good kids come through that, respond to that and everything. And I think treating the kids, like young men, understanding they're going to disappoint you, but you still hold them to high expectations. And like in all my years coaching, I've never kicked anybody off a team. And because it's always my thought, like if it doesn't they might not play, might not let them play or whatever, but if we really believe in what we're doing here as coaches, we should want these kids out here with us for 2 hours a day rather than going doing whatever else. So, in just kind of those kids knowing that, it's kind of like a parent. Cause I just had a son graduate this last year, he was all-state running back, linebacker. And I probably treated him way harder than I treated the other kids, but I tell the parents, I'm going to treat your kids exactly like I treat my kids, like how I want a parent to treat them. I'm gonna be fair with them. I'm gonna be honest with them. I'm gonna demand a lot out of them. But I'm like it would just be really foreign for me to like kick somebody off a team unless they were causing, some severe damage to the chemistry or something. But typically, what you identify your leaders in the football team and they kind of take care of that. And that's another thing that I think we did a pretty good job of, early on is finding those kids who are leaders and then kind of, hey, this is your job. You've got to take control of this, because if the coaches are always doing it, we're never gonna get to where we need to be.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you've done a good job of making sure you get those kids to buy in and then lead through them. So one of the things that I think is interesting is you've got what you call the 4 Fs, or I call it the 4 Fs because it's easy for me to remember it. You call it faith, family, football, and fun. Those are the things that you try to really put emphasis on in your program. And what I think is interesting about that is football is the third one down the line. And not everything emanates from that work, right?
No.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, that's something I got from Mike Davis. He was a coach. He coached up at Pompey.
Sure.
And Great coach. He was an assistant for me for a couple years. Then he went over to softball and won a state title doing that. So, but anyways, he and I looked at that and I was like, the faith part of, there's going to be years where you have down teams where you have tough kids, and if football is your number one thing, it's going to be real hard to sustain. Like you're just, coaches are going to get beat up, kids are going to get beat up. Like if you have I tell the kids, you don't have to have faith in God, but you have to have faith in a higher power. You are not the center of the universe, because if you believe you're the center of the universe, you can't be on a team. You can't be a team player. You can't be working for these other guys. So that's number one. And I tell the kids, and family is number two. So, and I do this with my assistant coaches as well. You only have your kids only grow up one time. So I will kick my coaches out of practice if they've got a family thing and they're like, oh no, we got practice. I'm like, nope, football will be okay. Well, you're important, but your role as a dad is way more important. And that's what they need to be doing. And, that needs to be the focus of that. I've been lucky in that, like, my kids are all, playing sports and everything, and my wife works at the school. So, our schedules, I don't really have to leave that often. There was a few times my daughter was playing volleyball at Midland where I'd leave practice, or I'd be like, hey, I'm going to watch her. And I'd give Dozel the whistle and be like, practice is yours. And, I have faith they're going to do what, they don't need me there, so we try to model that for the kids. Like, hey, where is he going? He's like, he's got a family thing. That's more important than what we're doing here. And and then sometimes with the kids, it's a little bit of a learning curve. Cause if you've got, grandma's 90th birthday party in Grand Island, yes, you can miss for that. But little sister's birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese, no, she'll have another one. There's
definitely a difference.
Yeah. So there's and they kind of figured that out. But just showing them that's, and then, the football part of it, we say during the season, it's, faith, family, school is relying with football, because if we don't got our school stuff down, then we can't play football, anyways. But, I always tell them that fun part, that's with the football team. Like that's, and I tell the kids this all the time. And, if you're not having fun, come talk to me, because we can move positions. Like I never tell a kid he has to play a position. I might tell him, if you played this position, you're going to get playing time. Mm-hmm. If you want to stay here because you love it, then stay there and work harder to get on the field. But if you moved, you're going to get on the field more. But I don't ever make a kid move, because if they're not having fun, they're not going to be playing as good as they could.
Sure.
If don't have the right mental attitude. Some kids like, hey, you want to move here? Yeah, I'll move. Does it get me to play? Yep. Okay, let's move. But I would never make a kid change positions. And typically I've never had it, at least I don't think I've had it cause an issue with the team as far as that goes. Like where, if we would have moved this kid to here, we would have been, won a playoff game. It's like, I've never had it be that extreme. So,
yeah. Well, you've got it well-rounded, and it is cooking, because like I said, 9 out of 10 seasons, you've gone to the state playoffs. So what you're doing is working, Coach.
Yeah.
And, that takes us to the point of the show. We call it 3 and out.
Okay.
And you call defense?
Yep.
Okay, so you're going to love this.
And
it's
offense.
1st and 10. 1st and 10. Here's the first question. These are kind of out there.
Okay.
But you get to do a 1-year internship. You got to give up coaching, but this is something you have to do. And you get to work with any coach for 1 year. It's a paid internship, but you got to go work with some other coach for 1 year. It can be high school. It can be college. It can be the NFL. Who's the coach you're going to work with?
Oh. Coaching currently, or?
Yeah, no. Let's say that it could be anyone.
Oh, that's a tough one. I really would have liked to see easy ones, Coach Osborne back in the 70s. I wouldn't even want to, and I know this from my best teams, like the year we won state, when we went on a 9-game winning streak, I didn't have to coach at all. Or just let the kids go out, just put the ball out there, and they just took care of it. Like, I want to see, the years you're not as good where you have to coach a lot, and see that, because
you're saying coach in the 70s.
Yes.
I mean, he was still winning 9 games.
He's still winning 9 games, but it wasn't. He wasn't just rolling over people.
Right.
I think that gets lost. A lot of times people think, this, the coach must be really good because they're winning all these games all the time. It's like, well, he's got the best players. Like if you got kind of a dynasty going, there's some good coaching culture going on there and that kind of stuff. But when you got dudes out there, you don't have to do a lot. They just you just don't wreck the ship, kind of a thing. So just to kind of see how he got it going in the 70s and built his culture into what it eventually became.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So Washburn in the 70s.
Yep.
Yeah, when it wasn't 94 through 97.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I like it.
When we was thinking about going to Colorado, and like what was going on around then.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, number 2. Here we go. It's now 2nd down and 7. You get to pick one player to start a college football program with. Same thing. This could be a player 50 years ago. But any player, but you get to pick. Let's do one on the offensive and one on the defensive side. Give me a player you start your football team with. You can go pick anybody.
Oh, I'm just, I would have picked Jerry Rice from, and not even from what he did in the NFL, but from how he practiced.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I tell kids this, every time he caught the ball, he ran in for a touchdown. Even if it was a 2-yard slant, he'd just take off and do a 50-yard sprint and bring it back. And just that mindset of work ethic. Once we got a few kids like that, not to that degree, but close to that degree, where every rep, where they were going hard in practice, boy, that gets contagious. And people just want to be around that. And then when you got, I've had some running backs that I sit there and blow the whistle and they just don't stop running. And I just love it. Because all right, get back, hustle back now, kind of a thing. So getting somebody with that kind of a mentality.
I love the reason for that. That is a great reason to pick Rice. Now, what about on the defensive side?
I mean,
I've got a little pressure on you.
Yeah,
I can tell.
Gosh, there's a lot of. I mean, because I try to think if I'm starting a program. You're
looking for something other than just talent.
Yes, because how do you pick the best guy in which position? It really doesn't matter. Like, you're looking for those kind of intangibles and those behind the, behind the scenes things that they would do.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Well, I got you stumped on this one. There's a bunch, aren't there?
Yeah, there's just I've got tons of names rolling through my head, but I'm like, I don't know if that's the key one, but God, I don't.
Well, how about for sheer toughness? I had this answer earlier from someone. He mentioned Sue. I mean, that toughness and mentality he had. I mean, he almost carried that team. Didn't he, that year?
Yeah, that defense was crazy. That there's some. And he was like a man among boys, kind of on that. Like, everybody else was, he was playing at a different level than everybody else. And I think back, Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor, like they had to change the rules of the game for the guys like that. But on the other hand, when they weren't on the field, I don't know if I'd want to start a program with them, kind of a thing. So it kind of gosh, there's so, from my era when I was growing up, I remember watching Reggie White, and I remember well,
those are good picks.
Yeah, that they, I was when I was real little, I was a Cowboys fan back in the Jimmy Johnson era, but I kind of got a little tired of the ownership there and don't really followed. But I always tell people, gosh, ever since kids always ask me about, did you watch the college game or you watch the NFL? And I'm like, No, but I could tell you what Aquinas is going to run on most third downs. Like
you're watching film.
Yes, I'm watching film all weekend, so I don't watch. Since I've become a football coach, I don't watch nearly as much football on the weekends as I used to. If it's not on Huddle or something like that.
That's true. Yeah, the names don't flow out as
Yeah.
easy. How about one I got for you here? We'll wrap on this one. It's now 3rd down and 4. So the question is, what defense you're going to call here to stop them, Coach? Superstition on Friday night. What is your superstition on Friday nights?
Every time, like right before the national anthem, I walk off kind of by myself and say a few prayers just to make sure the team. I don't want anybody to get hurt. Just kind of focus. Calm down, because I get very amped up for games.
Oh, I bet.
And like I get very excited and everything, and I just always make the time to go stand off to the side and kind of, all right, it's just a game. Kind of, we're playing football. We're having fun here, and just kind of trying to make sure my mind's clear and I can do my best job for the kids, and that's basically. There's not a whole lot else I do.
Don't step on the white chalk. And nothing like that.
I'm usually worried about. I'm usually worried about trying to keep my assistant coaches from getting kicked out of football games, because
welcome to head coaching.
Yeah, right? The white hats always ask me, "Who's your get back coach?" And I always am like, "It's me," because I'm like, I'm pulling these guys back.
I love it. Well, you've got a passionate coaching staff. Obviously, you've done an incredible job. You've pulled it all together in a short amount of time, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But congratulations for that. Can't wait to see your product on the field, your players on the field this year. It's going to be something fun. And thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
You bet.